Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into the next team preview video. Today's will be the San Francisco 49ers. I'm actually going to be pumping out a couple of these today. You might be wondering, Cody looks like he was just in the same shirt that he wore last one. No, it's the same day I'm recording it. I just shaved a little, did my hair up, got my workout in, got on a phone call, and I worked on this script so I can pump out this video, and I'm gonna see if I can get some more done for my subscribers of the channel. And today's video will be on, like I just mentioned, the 49ers. If you have not watched any of my videos in the past, to give you a quick rundown what to expect, I'll go over Kyle Shanahan, my feelings on him, the team's remaining cap space, and look at some notable players entering a contract year that have been on the team, an offensive preview, a defensive preview, a overall feeling on the team, and then I also kind of give a fantasy football perspective as I dive through the video, as far as players I'm avoiding, players I wouldn't mind drafting, stuff like that. And let's go ahead and might as well go ahead and get into this, right? Kyle Shanahan, I think the world of him. If you've followed my Twitter over the past few years, you can already know I stand for Kyle Shanahan. He's absolutely one of my favorite coaches in the league. You could consider him one of the best coaches in the league. He just needs to get over that hump and finally win himself a Super Bowl, and he will go down as one of the better coaches they'll coach during this era of the NFL. And as far as him, that's all you're looking out for Kyle. I mean, what does he have to do to prove himself? He's a winner when he has his full roster. Even when he doesn't have his full roster, the team is highly competitive. You know, we saw what we got. When he got one fully healthy season of Jimmy G, they reached the Super Bowl. They just didn't get the job done against the Chiefs that year. The Chiefs were the better team. They won that day, and he just missed out on his Super Bowl win. Now, or he's bringing back his full roster from last year outside of a couple guys, and I think he's going to be competitive once again, and we'll have to see. Again, it's just going to come down to him earning a Super Bowl. There's nothing else to pick apart about Kyle Shanahan, so I have high expectations for him to bounce back and have this team competitive for a playoff spot when he gets his guys back, like George Kittle, and as well, we'll see how Jimmy G and the Trey Lance situation plays out. I'll dive into that later. So why don't I just go ahead and move on? I don't have that much to talk about. I highly respect Kyle Shanahan. It is what it is. There's nothing you can pick apart about his coaching. He gets the job done no matter who is on the field. Who are the 22 players on the field? He gets it. He will always have his team competitive, have a chance to win games, and if he has his full roster, he's gonna give it. They're gonna have a great shot to make it to the Super Bowl. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the remaining cap space. San Francisco is currently working with $12.1 million in remaining cap space. That's per over the cap as of today. So they have some things they could do. Now, notable contract players, Lake and Tomlinson, maybe they work on an extension for him since he's a starting offensive guard for them. Jason Verrett has been a pleasant surprise for the 49ers after putting together a healthy season last year. But you want to see Jason put together back-to-back fully healthy seasons before I think you commit any type of long-term money to him. So I don't anticipate that. And Jaquiski Tartt's a very solid safety. He was banged up last year. I don't really see him getting a contract extension. So I kind of see San Francisco basically saving that space. Unfortunately, as I've just mentioned, they've kind of battled with seasons that kind of been plagued by injuries in the past. So they probably want to save some of that just in case they need to go acquire somebody via free agency, or potentially trading for somebody to help replace any players that may go down with injuries. Other than that, yeah, no contract extensions. Other than that, they'll be always acquiring people if they were to use any of that $12.1 million and not carry it over. Now let's go ahead and get into this offensive preview. These projected starters are from the Prospect Encyclopedia. Again, that's a project I actually work with from Roy Countryman, who got these starters together on the 49ers. So you can follow Roy at Preacher Boy Roy. Please do it. He's a great dude, one of my better friends in the industry, if not best friends in this industry. And this is his project, the Prospect Encyclopedia. Quick rundown. In order to make the top 22 player list for San Francisco, you have to have at least you have to have less than 12 career starts from the last 3 draft classes. So these are up and coming guys. I've explained this in a lot of time in videos, so I'm kind of just at this point ready to dive into it. But just in case this was your first time video you're watching on mine, to give you an idea, that's where these projected starters are pulled from. And then if you see any stars next to these names, that means they are inside that book. So these are guys that are rookies or guys that are still gaining that NFL experience. But let's start with the quarterback position. Obviously, that's the most debated position right now on the offense in San Francisco. We got Jimmy Garoppolo, who was, they traded for him a few years ago. They gave him the contract extension. He gets hurt at the beginning of the year, I believe in week 1 against the Chiefs. He's, I believe, out for that year. And then the next year, he's fully healthy. They get him to the Super Bowl. They miss out on that. And then last year, obviously, Jimmy G was hurt throughout the year. And that's kind of been the story of Garoppolo's career is, hey, when he's on the field, he's in Kyle Shanahan's system. He can get the job done. He's a winning quarterback under Kyle Shanahan. But the fact is that he just cannot stay on the field. And that's been the issue that has plagued him his whole career. Now, I do post these stats from 2018. Jimmy Garoppolo popped up in a couple of them. Let's take a quick look at it. Since 2018, Jimmy G actually has the 3rd most yards per attempt at 8.22, and he's been one of the more accurate quarterbacks over the last 3 years. He's actually had the 6th best completion percentage at 67.5%. So he's a very accurate quarterback. He's going to put the ball in the spot for his wide receivers and tight ends to get the yak ability, to use their yak ability, especially with the type of players they have in the offensive scheme underneath Kyle Shanahan. So he fits that scheme well. That's all you can ask out of. It sounds like he's having a great camp, but he's got obviously their their first round, number 3 overall pick in Trey Lance breathing down his neck. It sounds like Trey Lance is having one heck of a camp. I was a believer in Trey Lance. I had him as my quarterback 3 in this past draft class. I think he has a very high ceiling. I think he's a great fit for the offensive scheme underneath Kyle Shanahan. The thing that he's going to add is that he has the legs. So he's going to be able to stretch out plays. He's going to be able to, get first downs with his legs. So I'm excited to see the element that he can add to this offense once he gets in. The question is, how long will it be until Trey Lance gets in? Because eventually it will happen. Odds say, history says, it will happen this year. I forget the stat off the top of my head, but it's some stat where quarterbacks that have been selected inside like the top 10, they usually start like 10 plus games their rookie year. So you add that history in there, and then you add in the history of Jimmy Garoppolo's injuries, he's going to get in on the field at some point. Now, if you want to take a look at this from a fantasy aspect, I'm not drafting Jimmy Garoppolo. There's tons of quarterbacks I would love to have over him. If anything, Garoppolo this year is a spot starter. If he's still a San Francisco starter, by the time your quarterback has a bye week. Now, Trey Lance, though, that's the interesting one to watch, because I think he brings a high floor with him if he eventually does get the starting job at some point this season. But the question is, do you want to waste a draft pick? Not waste, but do you want to use a draft pick on him? Because if you do, you either better hope that he completely beats out Jimmy Garoppolo by the end of this month and he gets the week 1 starting job, or you're betting on that Jimmy G will either get hurt or lose the job within the first month or 2. Other than that, you're going to have to hold on to him on your bench for maybe at least 8 to 9 weeks, 10 weeks, depending on what San Francisco's record is and how Jimmy Garoppolo is playing. But I think once he gets on the field, as a rookie, you're looking at him as a quarterback 2. But if he can come out firing and be the quarterback they selected him to be, man, you're talking about maybe a sneaky deep sleeper guy that can be a borderline quarterback 1 for you. I bet on that he's probably going to, I could see him not even playing this year if Jimmy Garoppolo does just a fine job and they just develop him behind the scenes. But based on all the reports, based on how I feel about him, I think we will see him at some point, and I think he's going to put on one heck of a show underneath Kyle Shanahan. I'm just excited for it. I just don't know if I will be actively drafting for him, but by the time we get here next year, I think he's going to be a highly sought after quarterback in terms of fantasy. So if you play Dynasty, this is a guy I think you would be trying to get your hands on. for sure. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on to the running back position. Raheem Mostert will enter the year as a starter. And then of course they brought in some different guys though behind Raheem Mostert. They signed Wayne Gallman from the Giants, and then they drafted Trey Sermon and Elijah Mitchell in this past draft, and they also got Jermichael Hasty from last year. Let's start with Raheem Mostert. Raheem Mostert to me is obviously a very solid running back. We saw what he did a couple years ago against the Packers in that national championship game. We've seen what he can do last year on the field. He's got really great speed. He fits the system well, and as long as he stays on the field, he's going to be highly productive. But he has dealt with injuries, of course, throughout his career. So how I kind of view him in terms of fantasy, he's more of like he's a RB2 if he's on the field. But overall, he's more of a RB3 to me because I think he's going to eventually miss games. That seems to have been his, like I keep on saying, his issue in his career. And to me, he's like, say you draft like one of these highly rated rookies, like if I have Raheem Mostert, I'm gonna try to get Trey Sermon. I'm about to really pump up Trey Sermon. If I draft Mostert, I want to get Sermon. But say you draft maybe a Javonte Williams, a Travis Etienne, one of those highly drafted running backs in this class. Raheem Mostert's a guy I'm trying to get that I can play into my flex. I can play in my RB2 spot for the first 6 to 8 weeks. And then when one of those young rookie guys take over the job, I can slide them in over Mostert, unless Mostert's completely balling out throughout the whole year. But like I just kind of mentioned, I really like Trey Sermon. I think Trey Sermon's one heck of a fit for Kyle Shanahan's scheme. I think he's going to eventually blow up in this offense. I just don't know when. I think it's just a matter of, he's kind of like Trey Lance, right? What I just explained. He's got a veteran in front of him that does a fine job, that does a job good enough to keep his job. But that veteran in front of him has a history of injuries that keep him out of the lineup, right? So if how I view Trey Sermon, he's a guy I'm willing to draft a late round selection on, stash him on my bench, and find a veteran like a Raheem Mostert. Maybe you draft both of them, and you just wait for Sermon's chance to be the bell cow leader out of that backfield. And if he gets that this year, I think he can be a good RB2 for you. You just got to be patient with Trey Sermon. I think eventually out of all the backups in San Francisco, he's the guy I'm trying to get definitely on my bench. But Mostert and Sermon to me are definitely worth a draft selection. You just got to understand the strategy of both. Mostert's a first half of the season play, and if you get him for the second half, that's great. Sermon to me is a second half of the season play. Because I think at some point he ends up at least splitting 50-50 touches with Mostert. And then if Mostert has to deal with ticky-tack injuries, I think he ends up being that lead dog out of the backfield. Now let's take a look at their wide receiver position, because as far as this offense will be based on their wide receivers. Deebo Samuel, starting with him, he's entering his third year, so you guys probably know by now I'm a big year 3 wide receiver guy in terms of fantasy football, so I'm definitely trying to actively draft Deebo Samuel. He just got banged up last year. He's another guy on this team. Unfortunately, that seems to be the theme of the 49ers. They have guys with tons of potential, but they just deal with injuries. Deebo Samuel, I think, though, is set to have a great year. He's going to be comfortable within the scheme. I think Kyle Shanahan's going to develop certain packages to manufacture touches to Deebo Samuel. And I don't really think, no matter if it's Jimmy Garoppolo or Trey Lance, I think he's going to see a steady amount of targets, a steady amount of touches, where I think he's going to enter this year with a high floor in terms of the fantasy realm. And I think he's a guy that you can draft as your wide receiver 3. He can give you wide receiver 2, he can give you as high as wide receiver 1 weeks, just depending on how steady his target flow will be. And then Roy's got Jalen Hurd in here that will be used within the offense. Now that's a guy that has literally entered the league with tons of talent, tons of versatility, but each year he was out of the season before. So let's just see if Jalen can get to the season. That's definitely a guy I'll keep my eye on. I'm not trying to draft him in fantasy. Now, one guy I'm very excited about is Brandon Ayuk. He was my wide receiver 6 in his class, but I really loved his potential. And he definitely flashed a lot of great ability last year. He can be used on end arounds. He can be used on screens. He's got solid route running ability, and he's got an amazing catch radius with his long arms. So I'm excited what him and Deebo Samuel can do together. I think if these both guys can stay on the field and they can both deliver on their talent, I think by the end of this year, people are going to be talking about them being one of the best wide receiver tandems in the NFL. I'm excited to see how they complement off of each other, because they both have their own like unique skill sets of players, but they're yet somewhat similar because of their yards after catch ability. And I think that's why I'm not afraid of who's the quarterback for these guys. I think they fit what Kyle Shanahan wants his wide receivers to do within this offense. And Ayuk, to me, I think entering the year, you can view him more as a wide receiver 3 or 4, because you want to see Samuel's role, see if he's got a bigger role in the offense. But Ayuk's definitely a guy you get on your bench, watch how his role develops at the beginning of the season. Maybe if you're like me and you play in leagues that have 3 wide receivers, he's a wide receiver 3 for you on any given week, but he definitely fills in on those bye weeks. He fills in on those injury weeks. And then if anything happens to Deebo this year, because he does have a history of injuries, Ayuk's a guy that's a wide receiver 2 that can give you wide receiver 1 numbers. So I'm definitely excited about Deebo and Ayuk. Now, obviously, I think my biggest concern with this wide receiver room is, you get concerned over the depth. If Deebo gets hurt, if something happens to Ayuk, I've already talked about Jalen Hurd. He can be an interesting addition, but I want to see him make it to week 1 first before I can count on his talent. Mohamed Sanu Jr. Obviously, Mohamed Sanu fell off in New England and never really kind of got back going when he bounced around after that experience. Richie James is an all right wide receiver 4 or 5, just not a guy you can depend on if your starters go down. I kind of like Jawan Jennings because of his size and his red zone threat ability. I'll be kind of interesting to see if he can work his way into the rotation. But yeah, if these guys start to get hurt, I mean, this is going to be another year of a 49ers offense with a lot of potential, but they're decimated by injuries, and they just don't have the depth to supply the numbers that they need from their backups. And then obviously George Kittle, man, he's a beast of a tight end. You can make an argument. He's the one tight end right now you can make an argument against Travis Kelce as far as who do you prefer among all NFL tight ends. But since 2018, he's been one of the more productive guys. Among tight ends, he's got the second most receiving yards, the second most receiving yards per game. He's got the second most fantasy football points per game. That is PPR based. Third most receptions, 5th most yards per reception, and he's tied for the 8th most receiving touchdowns. What do you not like about George Kittle? He's a ferocious blocker. He'll run your head over, and he's got the speed to outrun linebackers and safeties. So he's a pivotal, a vital point of this offense. When he's in there, their offense can flow. It doesn't matter who the quarterback is. He will be able to produce. Again, I keep on saying this, and I feel I'm not trying to be repetitive. Again, it's a guy that, last year he got hurt, and then the year before he missed 2 games. So you just want to see all 17 games from George. I think he will. I do kind of think he just kind of had a bad luck in terms of injury last year, and I expect a bounce back year for George Kittle. He's an elite tight end in fantasy, and those are very hard to find. So I do not blame anybody that wants to draft him in those first 5 rounds of the draft, because having a steady tight end in fantasy is very hard to find. And then it's the same thing too. If he goes down, they got some young guys, but there's not much there to get excited about. So obviously with their skill position players, I think they're deep in the running back group. But when it comes to wide receivers and tight ends, if they lose George Kittle, if they lose Ayuk or Samuel or the both of them, it's going to be a inconsistent offense because you don't have the pieces in that scheme that are going to be running it at an efficient level. Now their offensive line, I think, is going to be very strong this year. They got you can argue they got the best bookend tackles in the league with Mike McGlinchey and Trent Williams. Laken Tomlinson's solid. You want to see how Alex Mack will perform. He's been a good center in his career, but now he's at the back end of his career. So is his age going to catch up to him? And we'll have to see if the rookie Aaron Banks can deliver at that right guard spot that Roy has him projected to. But this is an above average unit. So as far as their offense as a whole, you got to like what they have. Under Kyle Shanahan, they basically have everybody that fits his scheme well. They got a top offensive line unit in the league, in my opinion. So everything screams that if everything goes right and you throw out all health concerns, this has a making that can be like a top. You can push for a top 10, I think, underneath Jimmy. But if Trey Lance delivers on year one, you can might be sliding these guys in a top 10 offensive unit if these guys do stay on the field. Again, I'm going to repeat this probably all episode, but it's going to come down to their health. Now let's move on to their defensive preview. Again, these are the projected starters pulled from the Prospect Encyclopedia. These are per Roy Countryman. Follow him on Twitter at PreacherBoyRoy. And let's start with their defensive front. I want to start there because I really like what they're bringing on their defensive front. I'm a big Nick Bosa fan. Obviously, we want to see him bounce back off of his torn ACL from last year. When he is on the field, he's already one of the best edge rushers coming off the line of scrimmage. I do like the little combination of Zach Kerr. He's been always like a steady backup defensive tackle, but he has what it takes to be a decent starter in this league. I was a big Javon Kinlaw fan last year. You just love that guy off the field, and I wish him nothing but a blow-up year 2 for the 49ers. Eric Armstead is a very solid backup. And then they also got Dee Ford, who's working in the rotation. Since 2018, he's actually tied for the 5th most forced fumbles at 9. And I'm also kind of curious, these former Raiders that I was very surprised that they released, Arden Key and Maurice Hurst. I'm curious to see how they work into the rotation. Maurice Hurst was a top 5 D tackle for me in his class, but he had the heart issue, which caused him to drop to day 3. So I'm curious how they work in the rotation. I think they got a very deep defensive front as far as guys that they can work in with those starters. And as long as they can stay healthy, I think they're going to be very strong against the run. And I think they got an elite edge rusher that can get after the quarterback. And that's all you can ask out of your defensive front. And moving to their linebacker group, I obviously Fred Warner is a top 5 linebacker in this league. I understand the arguments for him to be the best linebacker. There's a healthy debate in one of my group chats yesterday about the top linebackers, but he's definitely a top 5 linebacker in this league. Since 2018, one of the stats that he qualified for was he has tied for the 7th most solo tackles since 2018 at 253. And then another guy I believe he actually battled with injuries too last year, is Drake Greenlaw. So as long as those two are on the field for that defense, they can command the presence. We'll have to see which younger guy, Aziza El-Shair or maybe a Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, or Justin Hillard, see who can step up alongside them. But either way, those guys are one of the 2 of the better linebackers. And, like I said, Fred's a top 5 linebacker, and he's got I think you got to like the fact that Javon Kinlaw and Zach Kerr and even Eric Armstead, if those three are on the field at the same time, those guys can command the presence of the offensive line, which should be able to allow Fred Warner to be able to flow all around the field a lot easier, not have to take on as many blocks. He's excellent in coverage. He's probably the best linebacker in coverage in terms of sticking on men. And then as far as their secondary, that's where I kind of start to get my concerns with the defense. I talked about it earlier. Jason Verrett, he bounced back his career, but can he prove to have back-to-back healthy seasons? Jimmy Ward and Jaquiski Tartt, that's a okay safety tandem. They're good, but both of those guys, I don't know. They don't get me excited. Let me just say that. I think they're very solid. As long as they stay on the field, they should form a very solid safety tandem. And then Quan Williams and Emmanuel Mosley is a guy I don't mind, but he's got to develop consistency, and obviously these guys got to step up with the absence of Richard Sherman, who's going to be the leader in that safety group, because sometimes the secondary, in my personal opinion, it does come down. You need a really good communicator in the back end of that defense. So who's that going to be? And if they're having to miss any guys, they are very lacking depth behind them. It's a lot of youth behind them. But one name that I totally forgot, Tony Jefferson, a former longtime safety. He's actually competing for a spot in training camp. We'll see if he makes the roster, but I did throw him down there as a notable backup. As far as a whole, though, I think this has a making of just a very solid defense. I wouldn't call it good. I wouldn't call it great. It's a very solid defense. And then you just kind of get worried, like with the linebacker group and the secondary, if injuries were to start to happen on that side of the ball. I think they got enough on the defensive front where they can replace players if injuries do happen. Obviously, you can't just replace a Nick Bosa, but they have guys they can throw in and that can get after the quarterback. It's a solid defense to me. And then as far as like streaming defenses, week one they got the Lions. As much as I like the Lions offensive line, I'm not a big fan of Jared Goff. So I'm all for selecting the 49ers defense as long as they're all healthy by week one and streaming them against the Detroit Lions. That's definitely seems like a high floor play if you wanted to draft the 49ers defense for week one. And then other than that, moving on to my overall feelings for San Francisco. I mean, as I've already said this whole episode, basically, it's going to come down to health. That's what it's going to come down to. Now, if they keep the top of the depth chart on that offense and defensive side of the ball, they're going to be highly competitive. And I don't think it matters if it's Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't think it matters if it's Trey Lance. They will be highly competitive no matter who the quarterback is. Now, if they start to get decimated with injuries to the wide receiver position and the tight end position, I think you're going to see a more of a inconsistent offense if Jimmy G is the quarterback. Now, if they put Trey Lance in there at some point, I think his ability to stretch plays with his legs would add another element and maybe open up the offensive more, where if any of those guys do go down, I think maybe he can somewhat make up the loss of those guys with his talent. But either way, with either Jimmy or Trey Lance, we've seen it in the past. It doesn't matter if it's CJ Beathard or Nick Mullins. Underneath Kyle Shanahan, he's going to figure out a way to have the offense move the ball, no matter who's on the field. So I don't have a lot of worry about the offense if they miss anybody. But obviously, if they have their full arsenal of weapons, I think that this could easily slide into a top 10 offensive unit. Again, their defense, I think overall their defense is just solid. They got a mixture of veterans. They got a mixture of young guys up front. I think it's just a good unit to have in the NFC West, because that's, I think, was okay. Throughout all the health concerns I've basically been yelling about this whole episode, the NFC West is going to eat each other alive. I think you can point to any of these four teams winning the division, and I think the fact that the 49ers have a very solid defense to go with a potentially high potent offense, if everything's running on full cylinders, I think they could push and survive the gauntlet of the NFC West and either win the division or slide in as a wild card team. And other than that, like if there's no health concerns, that's how I feel about them. They could barely miss the playoffs, like with maybe like a 9-8 record, but I think they can get as high as 11-6 and win this division and make it into the playoffs. So yeah, I mean, I'm never going to deny Kyle Shanahan and his ability to put together a winning team. But yeah, that's my episode for the second half of today. For those that are following this as I post these, my next team is going to be the Los Angeles Chargers. I'm gonna go ahead and work on that throughout my late afternoon, and at some point probably this evening I am going to record that and publish that, and that will probably be my last video of today. I'm trying to get all 32 teams out. My goal is to try to get all these done by not this next Sunday, but the following Sunday. That's my goal. By mid-August, I want to have all 32 team previews done so everybody can listen to these videos by the time they get in their drafts by mid to late August. And I just can't wait. We got these week one preseason games on Thursday. I'm going to get off here. Yeah, by the way, though, please like this video if you liked it. Please tell a friend to subscribe to my channel. My goal is to get to 100 subscribers by the time the NFL season kicks off. Let's do this. Subscribe, tell a friend. I'll see you in my next video, which will be the Chargers. Peace out.